This is a special deeper dive because, of course, it's the last of our last deeper dive of 2023. And we have about almost a full year of deeper dives. This is my first year doing the deeper dives. I know Tom has done them before, but I just want to let you all know we're going to continue this going into next year. And of course, like Kinsey said, we have our full, I guess you can say, library of different topics that we've talked about throughout the year and in previous years. So if there's something you want to, of course, dive a little bit deeper in on your own time, feel free to check those out. But we have Christmas coming up. It's almost 2023. The year has flown by, but there's new changes, new cyber attacks, new risks that we have to look out for going into next year. This past year was a lot happened in 2022, especially in the cyber world. I mean, starting off, we had the war overseas, which probably escalated all the cyber attacks and cyber risks tenfold. And so hopefully none of that happens next year, but of course we prepare for the worst. Now, Kinsey she is a professional at those introductions, but besides the professional things, a little bit about me. If you haven't hopped on our webinar before, of course, I work in cybersecurity. You could call me a specialist, but besides all the professional side of things, I am a little league coach. I like to coach basketball, football, t-ball is something that I've coached for about 8 to 10 years, and I've learned a lot of patience doing that, and it's helped me in my day-to-day tasks and jobs. But I'm also highly involved in the community here, as well as a food connoisseur. And with the holidays coming up, if you have a specific maybe Christmas dish or Christmas food that you're excited for, go ahead and throw that in the chat. I'd love to hear about it. One thing that me and my family do every single year, and it's a little different. Of course, everybody has their hams and things like that. But at my house, my mom has a shrimp boil, and she'll boil some shrimp, potatoes, corn. She still makes me my sweet potato casserole that doesn't go with the shrimp, but it's an amazing dessert that I like. Tom, do you have a favorite that you're looking forward to this year?
I just want to go over to your house.
Yeah.
I hope that those shrimp are royal reds.
Yes, they are. That's the only way.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
If you guys hadn't tried a royal red boiled shrimp, they're the best.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's a little different Christmas tradition, but I look forward to it every single year. Now, we do have a lot to talk about. Like I said, this is our last deeper dive of 2022. And so, of course, we're going to talk about a lot about the different risk and new things that we project or believe or you need to worry about, or at least prepare yourself for, regarding not only your business or your company, but also your personal. One thing that we talked about briefly this year is your personal cybersecurity and your personal security aside from the business, that, of course, we'll definitely be looking into more as 2023 approaches. But what's some of your biggest risk for next year? Some of these risks that we'll talk about may carry over from this year to next, but it all comes down to simply is if you are using the internet for anything that you do, you're vulnerable. Now, that doesn't mean don't use the internet. That's not a scare tactic. That doesn't mean don't use your phone, your laptop. You can still use the internet, but there's safe ways to do that. There's a safe way to use technology. And that's just the way of doing business now. We have to take these precautions and these preventative measures in everything we do using technology. And when you think about these risks and these risks associated with the internet and technology, our phones, mobile devices, laptops, computers, it's something that is not going away. These risks aren't going away simply because our businesses and really society, we rely on technology for everything. I mean, I was using my calculator on my phone today just to figure out a quick math problem with my bank account, but and just simply using it, my phone's connected to the internet. You're watching this webinar with a device that's connected to the internet, and we have to use this technology everywhere. And so regarding cyber threats, cyber criminals, they understand this necessity that we have regarding technology and the internet. And because in most cases, a lot of our businesses and just us overall are behind on those preventative cybersecurity measures, it's basically we're an easy payday or easy victim for these cyber criminals to cash out on, because our defenses are so behind, or they may not even be in place at all. And so going into 2023, we have a list of risk and vulnerabilities that you need to be aware of. But after we go through these risks, we're going to talk about how to address these risks, how to fill these security gaps that you may have, and overall, how to prepare yourself and your business to combat these cybersecurity attacks, these vulnerabilities. One that is commonly overlooked, but it's really 90% of successful cyber attacks, it really comes down to human error. And I'm going to say that number again. 90% of successful cyber attacks are a result of human error. Now, what do I mean by human error? Say you get an email from someone that you believe is a trusted source. You're in a hurry at work. There's a quick link attached in the email. You're kind of going through those emails. You click on the link real quick, don't think anything about it, then go about your day. Well, with what we're seeing today, and we're going to talk about phishing attacks and phishing emails, with that link, there could be something malicious on that website that it takes you to, or whatever it's associated with. That malicious intent could be a ransomware attack, a malware attack, which we'll talk about as well. But simply not thinking about it, just clicking on that link, going about your day, it's not that you had ill intent or you are a malicious cyber criminal. It's just you made a mistake. But that mistake could end up in millions of dollars, $1 million loss, or more than that for your company. And so things that we just overlook, that our day-to-day task, can end up being very costly for your company or another company, or overall could end up in that company or your business going out of business, closing doors, or closing shop for good. And that's what we're seeing often. Tom, can you talk a little bit about the internal vulnerabilities? That kind of goes hand in hand with that human error, but I know proper training is something that's overlooked internally on the employee side of things.
95% of all successful breaches involve a human failure of some sort. That means opening a file attachment that's malicious, Excel spreadsheet, or clicking on, say, a pop-up on a website, and it could be a legitimate website, a pop-up that says, you know, your computer's got a virus and call this Windows help desk, and they'll answer the phone, Windows help desk. And that's just another type of scam. Of course, during the holidays, there's all sorts of scams around gift cards and discounts on products. And well, Kinsey was on Channel 5 last night. For those of you in the local market, she was Kinsey was she had a bit on 5 News last night and again this morning. And it's on their website and YouTube if you want to look it up. But they were interviewing her amongst others about the holiday scams and everything. But the reason that we surround, you know, for those of you that are clients, the reason that we surround your firm with multiple layers of defense, in all honesty, it's to protect from the non-malicious insider, that serious weakness in the defensive layers. And even if you have security awareness training, anybody can fall for these scams. And we know that because we simulate scams in our own office for all of us. And Davin and I do not have a perfect score on it.
No.
And so don't think that just because I've written a couple of books on cybersecurity that those scams can't affect me and make me fall for them. And so we have other layers. And those of you that are clients have, you know, we practice a defense in depth strategy. That's why you have these services and these products there to protect you from ransomware and other types of attacks. Now, another thing is I want to point out that don't think that just because you have a computer that's not connected to the internet, that it can't be infected. They can be. Social engineering, once again, that psychological manipulation, that human failure can easily be used to infect a computer that's not connected to the internet. And furthermore, I would say that they're generally speaking, but almost without exception, computers that aren't connected to the internet, I would contend are even more vulnerable. So like Davin said, it's not, we have to, internet's a modern day and age. That's what you got to have to run your business. And so nothing's going to change that. Right. But it's being very cognizant of making sure that everyone in your organization is aware and takes it seriously and remains vigilant about and beware. Don't and believe me, especially the emails and other stuff, these guys are pros. This is not broken English, misspelled words, and bad graphics. I mean, these guys are professionals.
They look legit.
And they are amongst some of the best con artists in the world. And they can appear very legitimate and very personal, I might add.
That's right. And a lot of these human error faults or accidents, like I was talking about, of course, can in turn result in malware or ransomware being on your network and being on your device, however it goes about. But I did some research recently, and this is specifically for this past year. But the average ransomware cost, and this is including small businesses, medium-sized, large businesses, and I'll specifically talk on small businesses here in a second, but in general, on average, ransomware costs at a record high of $4.35 million this year. That's the average cost of a ransomware attack that a general business has to pay, of course, to get out of the ransom. That may include new devices, of course, paying the ransom, legal costs, things like that. But average cost over $4 million. Now, specifically for small businesses, in the first half of this year, 2022, the average ransomware cost, the average ransomware attack cost a small business roughly $140 plus $1,000. Now, in comparison, that is a 58% increase compared to the first half of 2021. Now, once again, I'll say that number again. It's roughly $140,000 is the average cost to a small business to basically survive, or most likely not survive a ransomware attack, basically get rid of the ransomware attack. Now, if you're a small business thinking about yourself, do you have just an extra $140,000, $150,000 sitting to the side to protect or prepare for an attack like this? If I was a gambling man, I would put money. I'd put money on saying no. But, and if you could say yes, you probably aren't a small business. But the thing is, average cost is $140,000 to protect your company, your small business a month. Could be less than $100 a month to protect every computer on your in your network or in your business. And thinking of the cost and the risk association there, and what you're willing to invest in protecting your company, instead of betting that and hoping that you don't have to pay that $140,000 or close your doors, that's just what business owners and companies have to think about and deal with every single day now. And once again, that's also not going to change. These threats aren't going away. And so that risk of a ransomware attack is not going to go away as well. And this, we just saw an increase of 58% of that average ransomware cost just from 2021 and 2022. We have no idea what the increase may be for 2023. And so to put that into perspective, malware and ransomware attacks, those are huge risks that are overall putting businesses making them close their doors. And was it, Tom, after experiencing a ransomware attack, I think it's 40 to 50% of those small businesses go out of business in the next 6 months. I believe that's
Yeah, 40, basically it depends on the survey, but
Mhm.
40 to 60% go out of business within 6 months to 2 years. You know, you got reputational damage. Now, some of you are in businesses that you're not going to close up, right?
Mhm.
Or mission critical businesses to your customers and your clients. But that doesn't mean that you know your reputational damage, the financial losses, loss of productivity, delivery of your services and products. I mean, those can be catastrophic to all your customers.
Your
So,
customers and your employees as well. I mean, imagine not being able to send out payroll for a month or two, how that would affect your employees and, of course, the business as a whole.
yeah, we're not, and on the case of ransomware, we're not seeing a decrease in these attacks. They're getting
Oh, no.
better and more sophisticated in different threat vectors going into 2023. We're seeing a lot of compromised websites being used to deliver payloads, and that goes back to making sure your website hosting is managed, the software patches and updates are applied to the operating system and WordPress and all the other various components of the platform. You know, and monitored for denial of service attacks and code injections and all these nasty little things that can be a threat to prospects, just people wanting to do business with you.
That's exactly right. And now phishing attacks, they do go hand in hand with human error. But like Tom was saying recently, especially during the holidays, phishing attacks are increasing dramatically. Kinsey had that interview last night, hoping that we can educate and help others just to understand that, one, these phishing attacks are real and they're not going away, but also the different types of scams. They talked about last night, people asking for fake donations or fake posts about missing animals, missing people, like things like that. Do not give these cyber criminals the benefit of the doubt. Question everything, but it really comes down to, don't give information or money to someone that you truly do not know. That's just a quick tidbit, but these phishing attacks and these scams are definitely increasing as we come to the end of the year. One thing that's we saw a big increase this year in was password attacks and the need for a tool called a password manager. Now, Tom, I know you can talk a little bit more on these password breaches. What was the time that it takes to, I believe it was a 5-character password and a 10-character password, and then after that, once you get to 20 plus, it starts going into the years that it takes to breach.
Right. So, and this is something important to learn, that in 23, let's say, and I can't remember the exact numbers, and we've got it on our website, and you can find it. You find this data, but let's say it's an 8-character password. Well, in 2021, an 8-character password can be brute forced in 5 months of computing time. But in 2020, well, it was 2020 and then 2022, just not too long, just a few months ago, they did the same test. And because of the advances in technology, instead of it being a 5 months to brute force crack a password that's trying all the permutations of 8 different upper lowercase numbers and special characters, what took 5 months 2 years ago now takes 5 weeks. And so for that reason, I like people, because I've got passwords that I've had for 20 years. And 20 years will sneak up on you in a hurry. and so go ahead. If you're using a password manager, that gives you the luxury of not caring what it is, making sure it's always unique per website, but you can spin that thing up to 20, 25, 30 characters. I try to do like 25 characters every time. There's still a few websites that has an 18 or 16 character limit, which is fine. But with quantum computing coming on board and these other incredible technologies, we may find ourselves where something that took 5 years or a million years, quantum computing could change that to where it's a month.
Yes,
so
and
just why not go ahead and make it 20 characters,
yes,
so
and that makes me think to ask the question to you all. Just ask yourself the question: How are you managing your passwords? How are you storing and protecting your credentials? Like I said, password breaches are becoming more common than ever. And if you're relying on maybe a notepad to keep all of your logins on, just you keep it on your desk. Well, of course, what if it gets lost? What if it gets stolen? What if there's just a natural disaster? Now all those credentials are gone. Or maybe say you're using an Excel sheet. You store it and save it on your device, and that's where you keep all your credentials. Well, if your computer becomes breached, now not only do they have access to your computer, but now they have access to all of your credentials and everything that they are associated with. And so when thinking about password vulnerability, password attacks, simple fix, very inexpensive fix is a quick and easy password manager. Makes life 10 times easier and secures your passwords. So that's something to think about definitely going into 2023.
And if any of you guys are running LastPass, I would get off of that. There's something fishy going on at LastPass. They've not divulged, and it's not good. You need to get off of it. So just FYI.
Now, going into 2023, of course, we saw a lot of new threats and threats adapting and changing, of course, and getting better. But there's a lot more, a lot newer technology coming out in the next year. And overall, cyber threats are changing. They're adapting. And as just a business owner, or just as a regular person worried about your own security, you have to adapt and change as well. And we're going to talk about briefly 5 key things that you need to do, or at least you need to implement as soon as possible coming up in the next year. And we're also going to talk about how to understand where you're exactly vulnerable and what's the first step at preparing for 2023. Before we go into really the 5 things that you really need, I do want to put this in perspective. We talked about the risk, and we talked a little bit about the costs associated with attacks. But like we said, around 40 to 60% of small businesses will go out of business in the next 6 months after becoming a victim to a ransomware attack or overall a cyber attack. But this is something that we touched on earlier in the year. 40 to 50% in general of all small businesses will go out of business in the next 2 years due to a cyber attack, due to a cybersecurity attack. That's including all small businesses. So imagine just cutting those in half in the next 2 years. And you basically have a flip of a coin chance if you are a small business that you'll go out of business in the next 2 years because of a cyber attack. And that's the worst that can happen. All of the time and effort you've put in to build your company and invested in your company taken away in seconds, possibly because somebody clicked on a link, or that human error aspect. So when you think of what's the worst thing that can happen, of course, going out of business, not being able to provide that service or that overall business to your clients. But how do you prevent that? How do you prepare for those attacks? How do you plan to stay in business in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Well, it comes down to these 5 things, and we're briefly going to go through these as we come up on the 30-minute mark. But these 5 things are extremely important, and these 5 things may change as the years go along. I know these 5 things have been extremely important in 2022, but these aren't the only things that you need to do. There's a lot more security tools, practices that you may need depending on your vulnerabilities. But these 5 things that we found, this isn't just us saying it. What you'll see, this is actually a letter from the White House. You'll see a name up there, Ann Neuberger. She's acting national security advisor. She was on TV often, but basically she works in the White House, and she covers and is in charge of everything and advises the president on everything cybersecurity, cyber threats, technology. And 2022 was a very, very busy year for her. But what she did is she took an executive order that the President Biden had put out in 2021, and she narrowed, it was like 40 page executive order. She narrowed that down to about 3 or 4 pages and directed it to CEOs, all businesses in the United States, urging them to protect themselves and prepare for the threat of ransomware. She covered these 5 things. If you have a notepad, I definitely advise writing these down. And as 2023 approaches, these are the 5 things that you need to look at implementing. And some of them are practices. Some of these things are something that you can do for free, but all of them are extremely important and really are the bare minimum the bare minimum steps that you need to take to protect yourself, protect your business.
Yeah. And if you want a copy of this letter, because there's some other good stuff in it, it's only 3 pages, but there's other good things and goes into a little bit more detail about these 5 things and some other stuff. We'd be happy to send it to you, or you can just Google it. It's on whitehouse.gov.
Definitely. One thing that's extremely important to me is an EDR tool. So what is the EDR? What does EDR stand for? EDR is Endpoint Detection and Response Tool. You may hear MEDR or XDR, but basically, if you are relying on antivirus to protect your network, your computers, your business, then basically you have no protection at all. You hear us saying that antivirus is useless. It's an old tool. And why do we say that? What do we mean by that? So I'll keep it very brief, but the way antivirus works, it relies on virus signatures, known virus signatures that are known to be malicious, and it's searching for those virus signatures. But what has happened, and like I said before, we mentioned that cyber threats are changing. They're adapting. Ransomwares are changing, and they don't contain virus signatures anymore. And so the reason that we say antiviruses are useless is simply because they're looking for something that's not there. And that doesn't mean that there's no tool that you need or that can protect you now, because the EDR, the Endpoint Detection Response Tool, that is, I call it the big brother to the antivirus, but that is the tool to replace and basically help you adapt from that antivirus tool that's useless now. This tool, it's a very advanced and amazing source of technology, but basically it doesn't rely on those virus signatures. It's behavior based, looking for out of the ordinary behavior on that network, on that computer, looking for threats such as, say you click on that link and it looks like a normal website to you, but maybe it's trying to gain admin credentials or access a folder in the background. Those behaviors aren't normal, and you need a tool to detect those threats, but also a tool that can stop those threats, isolate them, and eliminate, or at least make sure as little damage as possible happens to that overall computer, that network, and that business. And that's what an EDR tool does for you. But it's not something that you can just buy off the shelf. It's not something that you can go to Best Buy like you do an antivirus. It's something that you actually need a cybersecurity team to manage and deploy for you. Of course, there's lots of different other capabilities that the EDR contains, but if you don't take anything away from this webinar, EDR, Endpoint Detection Response, that response tool, that is a tool that you need in 2023 to assure that you will not become a victim of a ransomware attack. That is a tool that you need to prevent all cyber attacks, or at least as many cyber attacks as possible in 2023. And that needs to be one of your first layers of security. It doesn't need to be your one and only. It needs to be your first layer that you implement next year.
And if you're a current client, you have at least one.
Yes, at least one.
And we're seeing some of the off-the-shelf stuff using that EDR phrase, but those are not anywhere near enterprise grade. Their Fortune 100 companies are not going to use that stuff. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Multi-factor authentication, that's a tool and a practice that became a lot more popular this year in 2022. And that trend, I guess you could say, is not going anywhere. That's something that you need to use everywhere that you can, anywhere that you can. And usually often when using a password manager, it allows you that option to turn on multi-factor authentication. But basically the way I like to put it, well, let me find this thing. Say you have to log into Facebook. If multi-factor authentication is enabled, of course, you have to put your login and credentials in. But after you log in, the next thing that you have to put in or type in to actually log in and access the information you need to is a code that's sent to your phone. And I like to say, say your password or your credentials become compromised. Well, if that is the case, the next thing they have to do is, for me personally, reach in my pocket, grab my phone, and get that code that's been sent to my phone. So that extra layer of security is something that's extremely important, and most likely multi-factor authentication will be used everywhere for every login. And I don't know, maybe the next 2, 3, maybe 5 years, just because the increase in those password compromises that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and while you're on the subject, just real briefly, if you can use Google Authenticator or your password manager in lieu of a text message or even email, use the authentication methods, the
100%.
Password manager or Google Authenticator or whatever you're using. They are a little bit more secure. There's some things happening that's brand new now, like 5G network splicing or slicing. That they're using, that technology is being used to intercept text messages and other things on even a cellular network.
No, you're completely correct. Next thing is use encryption. Now, this is something that can be turned on anywhere, and most of the time it already is. But if not, turn on disk encryption, and basically you can turn that on your laptop, I believe your mobile devices. But say you're getting rid of a laptop or a mobile device, something that you used to store information on or overall data. The fact of the matter is information stays on those devices a lot longer than you would think. And so it's important to protect that data, you could say after the fact, after you get rid of it or after you're done with that device. And that's where encryption comes in hand very, very well. But really, it's about decreasing those attack vectors, those layers of security. It's another layer that you can add to get to that defense in depth approach to protecting your business.
Yeah, there's a lucrative criminal industry that thrives on harvesting old hard drives and just mining them for data for fun and profit. So
now the last two that we'll talk about kind of go hand in hand, but one is actively and continuously improving your defenses, improving the technology you use to protect your business, adjusting your defense as needed. For example, in the beginning of the year, of course, the war overseas happened, and we started seeing an influx in activity from that part of the world. And so we had to adjust our spam filtering, adjust different firewalls to combat that influx of activity. But say you're planning to expand or grow your business this year, adding in new technology, maybe adding servers. There's a long list of things that you could do, but as you grow, as you change your company, there's different risk associated with that as well. And being able to adjust your defenses to fit whatever your business model may be going towards or changing to in the next year. Maybe you're going fully remote. Of course, there's risk associated with that. And you have to put the specific defensive or preventative measures in place to help fill those gaps as you grow or fill those vulnerabilities as you grow. And we're going to talk about understanding what those vulnerabilities might be here in a second. But to continuously improve your defense, what you need is simply a skilled cybersecurity team, someone that will understand your business model, understand your vulnerabilities, and put these specific defensive measures in place to make sure you have the needed layers of security to protect your business. Now, what you should expect from your skilled security team, of course, monitoring threats and investigating and stopping threats 24/7. Like I said, these cybersecurity, it's not do it yourself anymore. You can't rely on tools that you buy off the shelf in Best Buy anymore. You have to have cybersecurity specialists that know what they're doing, that know what these threats look like, how to stop them, and also how to prevent them from causing any damage or any further damage that they may have an ongoing attack. These professionals, these specialists in cybersecurity, they understand how these threats are adapting. They understand how these threats are changing. And of course, with that, they know what tools and technologies to use or to look forward to or help you plan to implement in the future to combat these ever-changing threats. Now, before we get to our last topic, this last bullet point you see here, this is something that's extremely important simply because we've had IT for a long time. We've had IT professionals, IT companies, break fix companies, and we've relied on them for everything regarding technology for our businesses. But now, as the risk of cyber threats and ransomware and phishing attacks rise, there's now a need for IT and your cybersecurity team or an information security team. And it's not that you need one or the other. It now comes and it's just part of doing business that you need both. And what's the difference between IT and cybersecurity? Well, it really comes down to objectives and specialties or specialty. Regarding IT, they're more operations focused and making sure you have the proper technology and making sure the technology that you have works to do your job, or basically to operate that business. Make sure whatever task or service you're trying to provide, that the technology is in place to help you do that to the best of your ability. Now, from
the analogy I like to use is, if you need heart surgery, you don't go to your buddy that's a neurosurgeon to get your heart surgery done. You need to think about it like that. I'm sure somewhere there is somebody that can do both and is very competent and highly skilled and very good at both, but that's rare. Yes. And the same thing in between IS and IT, or InfoSec and IT. And we work with a lot of firms that have either on-staff IT or they outsource their IT. And it's really about applying the best skill sets to the objective that you're addressing, your gaps that you're addressing in your firm.
That's exactly right. And talking about gaps and addressing those, I know we've talked about that very briefly as we've gone through our message today. But one question that I'm asked often, and it goes hand in hand with these gaps and vulnerabilities and knowing where to start. Basically, I get asked all the time, what's the first step? Where do I start? I know that I need cybersecurity. I know that my business is behind on our security approach. I know we are vulnerable. Well, what's the first step? And I always advise people, the first step, don't just throw cybersecurity tools at your company. Don't just go and buy everything off the shelf and hope that it works. You need to take a planned, meticulous approach to cybersecurity and overall protecting your business. The first step, I always tell everyone, is assess your risk. Understand and figure out where you're vulnerable, and then start building the plan to protect your business. Now, what you see here, this is a cybersecurity and risk assessment that I highly, highly recommend you investing your time in. Now, this specifically is a assessment that we do for a lot of people that come to us. And this actually is a cybersecurity and risk assessment that we offer for free. And we'll put up a link where you can schedule this assessment at the end. But this assessment really shows exactly where you're vulnerable and puts it on a level where you can measure the extreme vulnerabilities and start planning to address those immediately, and then build your plan out from maybe the not as immediate problems, or it'll even show things that you're already doing well. But this is assessment that I recommend to every company that you have annually. This is something that you need to do every single year, understanding where you're vulnerable, what's changed in your business. And then, of course, you can develop your security plan to fill those gaps that you may have every single year. And this is the first step that I would recommend to any and every company. Say you could already have all the security tools in the world, and you believe you are locked down. That does not mean that you don't need an assessment. It takes maybe 30 minutes to an hour out of your time, but overall, it gives you something that you can take away, review with your team, your board, your partners in the company, whatever you need to say, hey, this is where we're vulnerable, and we need to work on a plan to address these in the next year, in the next 2 years.
I want to take a question that David asked earlier, and thanks for waiting patiently. I know we're over. David asked, how are computers not connected to the internet vulnerable?
Mm-hmm.
Well, all you need to do is ask the Iranians about that, because all of those centrifuges that we destroyed in their nuclear enrichment facility, that whole entire facility was not connected to the internet in any shape, form, or fashion. Rumor has it that it was simple matter of social engineering, scattering a few flash drives around the parking lot, and somebody plugged one in inside the facility. Now, you may say, well, we're not Iran and we don't have the NSA cyber command going after us. That's true. But I have received, back in the old days, CD-ROMs and floppy disk, and now flash drives in the mail for things that, from Microsoft even, and other vendors, that and they were either software updates or maybe some marketing or other materials. It doesn't really matter. They were infected. Those devices were infected themselves. And if it's not connected to the internet, there's not going to be any protection in place to stop the spread of that virus. And it's not even going to be detected until it wants to be detected, right? So, and not to mention all the software patches and everything that aren't being put on there, regardless of whether it's a vertical market, industrial control system. It doesn't really matter, medical equipment or whatever, because if it's connected, those patches and everything are much, much easier to deploy and much less likely to be contaminated. Those CD-ROMs, flash drives, and all that, those were contaminated at the factory in many instances. Before Microsoft even got the blank CD-ROMs or the flash drives or whoever your vendor is, they didn't know they were distributing malware. Mm-hmm. So that's just one way. Social engineering is, people are curious to pick up a flash drive. You get a flash drive as a giveaway at a trade show. That's one thing you never see us give away because it's an attack vector. And besides all of that, I just argue that a computer is not connected to the internet. It's useless anyway. Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, this is the contact info for us. There was something else about the 2023 stuff but I can't remember what it was on the top of my head. And I dropped that White House letter in chat. And so, like I said, it's 2.5 pages, and it's addressed to business owners. That's the White House wants our help. So, and then I dropped a link just for fun to Royal Red Shrimp there in the beginning. So.
I highly advise checking out the Royal Red Shrimp.
Yeah.
But I know we went over time. This is the last webinar of the year, and we're very excited that you all attended. Once again, you can use this link, meeting.irontechsecurity.com, to schedule a meeting. It could be 30 minutes. We can keep it 15, however much time that you need. We can talk about your company, understand, talk about possible vulnerabilities, even help you develop a plan for 2023 to protect your organization. And that could be something you implement as soon as possible, or it's something that you plan to implement gradually as the year progresses. But We want to help you, help educate you. And of course, with this assessment, we don't just give you those vulnerabilities and say, figure it out yourself. That's actually something that we can help with as well, implement and put those specific defenses in place to fill those gaps, fill those vulnerabilities that you currently have. If you have questions or if you just want to chat, feel free to email. You have my phone number. But thank you all for attending this year, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I hope 2023 starts great for everyone.